In this video, we are going to briefly describe the four mechanoreceptors and their functions. We will then focus on the Meissner corpuscles and the pathway their information takes to the brain. Cutaneous mechanoreceptors are sensory organs located within the dermis of the skin. They respond to stimuli such as stretch, pressure, and vibration. The tactile information they detect is necessary for forming voluntary actions. There are four types of cutaneous mechanoreceptors that exist in hairless skin, which include Meissner corpuscles, Merkel discs, Pacinian corpuscles, and Ruffini endings. These receptors differ in their location on the skin, receptor field size, innervation patterns, and the types of tactile stimuli they are sensitive to. In terms of location, receptors can either be surface receptors, also known as type 1 receptors, which exist at the boundary between the epidermis and the dermis, or they can be deep receptors, also known as type 2 receptors, that exist deep within the dermis. The surface receptors include Merkel discs and Meissner corpuscles. A specific characteristic of the surface receptors is that they each have a very small receptive field size with several hotspots. In fact, Merkel discs have the smallest receptive field size compared to all of the mechanoreceptors. Another characteristic of surface receptors is that they have branched innervation. This means that each nerve fiber innervates approximately 100 surface receptors. The deep receptors include Ruffini endings and Pacinian corpuscles. Deep receptors have a much larger receptor field size than surface receptors and typically only have one hotspot. In terms of innervation, each nerve fiber only innervates one deep receptor. In addition, these receptors can either be categorized as slow adapting or rapid adapting. The slow adapting receptors are Merkel discs and Ruffini endings. A slow adapting receptor produces a sustained firing rate as long as a stimulus is applied. The rapid adapting receptors are Meissner corpuscles and Pacinian corpuscles. A rapid adapting receptor only fires action potentials at the onset and offset of a stimulus. Meissner corpuscles are rapid adapting surface receptors, and the remainder of this video will focus on the specific functions of this type of receptor and the pathway its information takes to the somatosensory cortex. Meissner corpuscles have small, complex receptive fields with several hotspots, and they have branched innervation. They also only fire at the onset and offset of a stimulus. Some specific types of stimuli that Meissner corpuscles respond to include the initial contact of an object with the hand, moving stimuli, stroking, fluttering, friction, fine forms, changes in fingertip forces, low-frequency vibrations, and slippage of an object in the hand. If a bar of soap was to slip out of a person's hand, the physical stimulus would be translated into an electrical impulse. Sensory afferents that innervate the Meissner corpuscles would then travel in bundles to enter the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. Since the stimulus is coming from the hand, the somatosensory information travels up the dorsal column in the cuneate fascicle. The information then decussates from the ipsilateral side to the contralateral side at the level of the inferior medulla. Next, the sensory information synapses onto a second-order neuron and travels up the medial lemniscus, past the medulla, pons, and midbrain, until it reaches the thalamus, where it synapses onto the ventral posterior lateral nucleus. A third-order neuron transfers the information from the thalamic nuclei to the somatosensory cortex through the internal capsule. This pathway is known as the dorsal column medial lemniscal pathway. Once in S1, information from Meissner corpuscles is processed in two of the four divisions of the somatosensory cortex, areas 3B and area 1. Once processed, the information is sent to the primary motor cortex, anterior parietal cortex, and corticospinal tracts, for further processing and integration with ongoing voluntary actions.